Hello, how are you?
Just trying to keep it cool today. Cool. Appears I've been drinking today, and that would explain the beginning of the video. Actually not, I'm just trying to keep cool. It's really hot today, and that's why today's topic is so important. It's the Ford Performance cold air intake, and so that's what we're going to talk about today, along with the K&N filter install. So this is my in-depth review of the Focus power upgrade pack, the FR1. This is going to be part one, where I do the cold air intake and the K&N filter. I was going to do the exhaust first because that's the reason I bought that package to begin with. But while I was filming, I lost my GoPro, and I was getting some amazing exhaust footage. But I have so much wax on my car, and the suction cup, I knew it was having some difficulty sticking, but it slid right off. Easier to read all this if I had this up. So there it is, the cold air intake and the K&N filter, straight from the directions. You can get this. I got mine on from CJ Pony Parts for $179. It's currently on Monsoon for $299. Anyway, they can charge whatever they want. I had this installed, and this is going to be my review of it. It's going to include two things. The first part we go over is is it actually getting air? So that's number one. I have a little test to prove that. And then number two, is it getting cold air, or is it making cold air? And we have a couple of tests for that. So that's what we're going to go through today, starting with the cold air intake. So first we're going to talk about the cold air intake. So here's a little description of what it looks like inside the car and kind of the setup of the cold air intake. You can see it up close. There's the cold air intake and where it's positioned inside there. There's the left edge. Some people paint those red, so it really stands out. I went stealth mode. I was going to put red around it to make it stand out better, or paint it, or put some striping on it, but then nobody knows that you have it. So here is basically the cold air portion of the car, how it works. Now this intake uses the stock box and everything. It's not like one of those open ones you see so much. Many people have the cold air intake that's open. This uses the stock configuration and box. So it comes up from there, goes behind where they cut a hole for it, then it goes back through there, comes up and into this intake right there. You can see right here, there's the intake comes in, and it takes two paths actually. It splits. Some of it comes down through here, down this path here. And the other half comes down through here, and it comes out this bottom hole through here. So all the way through and then down through here. Now, of course, you could have that installed yourself. But if you notice in these directions right here, the first bunch of pages is how to remove your front end clip off your car. Not fun. You also have to cut a big piece of plastic in between kind of your radiator and your front clip, and that's got to be perfect and everything. I just took it to the dealership. It's much easier than all that. So next, I did a little test to see if how the cold air intake, how that works as far as getting air inside there. So what I did is I kind of set up a test where I took some yellow paper and I punched out some holes and set it up in front of the grill. And then proceeded to see what happens. So here we go. Yeah, you can see that it is actually doing something. It sucked all those items into the car. Do not do this. You could severely damage your motor. If your air filter wasn't working or something, it would just suck all that air into your motor and just burn it up. It would be a mess. Yeah, that really sucked it in. I didn't expect it to suck it in like that because it's actually several inches back from the front end. It still had the suction. So I did a little calculation and I estimated that at full throttle, the Focus is probably pulling in about 5 cubic feet of air a second. And it's probably twice as much as your ShopVac does. So it really has some suction. So this part is really getting air. It's getting it from outside the car. The only problem is you have to do this. Yeah, and as you can see, it really sucks in a lot of stuff. You have to vac out the air filter. You have to take the filter out, vac all that stuff out of it. Make sure it's out of all those hoses and everything. What a mess. I actually drove it for a while and then opened it up again, and there were more pieces of paper all through there that I had to clear out as well. So I don't suggest that, but anyway, we've proved that it really is sucking air and sucking it quite well. So anyway, the next part was to see how the cold air intake, how it actually works as far as does it get you cold air and does it make a difference. So we did this test on a 75-degree day. Just to get some readings. This is my temperature gauge I use. It's not digital, it's not very accurate, but it gets the job done and can sit inside the motor and work. So I did this in 2 configurations. I did it with the box kind of stock with it closed, and I also did it with it open so we can check the difference. So you'll see I take that out and I go ahead and put in the gauge right there, then I put it back in. Yeah, so each time I drove the car, I would put the gauge in there and I would drive it for 15 minutes just to test the configuration. It was in the exact same route, driving the exact same way, and I did 3 passes. I did first with the temperature gauge not anywhere near the cold air intake, just in the center of the motor. That's where I had the gauge, just to get an idea of how hot it gets under there. 75-degree day, and on that day the motor itself was 110 degrees under the hood. And I would estimate it would be much hotter on hotter days, and if you were running it in the track or whatnot. Then the next way I drove it in that open configuration. And when I drove it open configuration, the temperature at the right there at the air filter was like 88 degrees on a 75-degree day. So that type of open configuration was like 13 degrees hotter. Then I did the actual stock configuration the way I have with the new filter, just see what the temperature difference would be. 75-degree day, and at that point it was only 82 degrees inside that intake at that point. And that is because it's pulling the air from outside the motor. Those open configurations is pulling the air from, basically it's mixing with the air under the motor plus outside the motor, and that's why the difference. It's this configuration where you got the stock box is actually much lower temperature. I actually think if you're running on at a track day, I'm imagining it would be much different. I know people are over 100 degrees at their air intakes when they got their access port connected, and that's because there's no cold air. I also think that if I took this cold air intake and actually installed some kind of insulation around the outside of the box, then it would be much better, because then all the heat outside of that box would not be getting into the cold air intake, making the temperature much, much lower, because that cold air is driving it in. So that's kind of my test on that. Cold air intake from the front out there is, and I would expect that because it's getting the air from outside the car, it's going to be much lower. Makes a real difference as far as temperature goes, and definitely sound, because if you think about it, that little tube is sucking just like a ShopVac would, and that definite suction in sound makes a huge difference in your car. One note I should mention, if you go to the track, I know a lot of people like to turn their cars off so it doesn't overheat when they're waiting between runs, maybe if you're autocrossing or not. And I myself always did that, turned the car off, let the engine cool, and thought I was helping myself as far as that goes. But during these tests, I found that shutting off the car actually makes that air intake temperature higher, because it's not sucking in cool air. So the actual way, if you want to actually have cooler air in your car, is to actually leave your car running, because it's pulling in cold air from outside the car. Of course, that's only if you have this intake. If you're using that other intake that's open, you're just sucking hot air into your car. But if you want to keep your motor cool, get one of these cold air intakes, and in between runs, let it run. Thanks for stopping. I'll do parts 2 and 3 on this Focus ST Power Upgrade Pack coming up. This isn't the most exciting one, but I think there's a lot of good information I got out of this that might help you. Feel free to like, comment, dislike, or subscribe. Thanks for stopping, and cheers.